In this video, we'll be taking a look at 3 NHL games happening on January 12th, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 6 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released, so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 3 NHL games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start, if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Tampa Bay Lightning versus Philadelphia Flyers. We have a Monday night rematch in Philadelphia. Same building, same teams, but a slightly different emotional script. Tampa Bay skates in with that glossy 27-13-3 record, a 9-game heater behind them, and the sense that everything is clicking at once. They have been living in that sweet spot where top-end talent and structure hold hands, sitting near the top of the league in both scoring and goals allowed, with roughly 3.5 for and about 2.6 against per game, which adds up to that chunky plus 39 goal differential people keep talking about. What makes that even more unnerving for opponents is that they are doing it while their blue line looks like a trophy shelf in a repair shop, with Victor Hedman, Ryan McDonough, and Emil Martinson Lilleberg parked on injured reserve alongside Scott Sabourin. Yet somehow, the machine still hums. They lean on layers. The forwards carry a lot of the glamour, with that wave of skill headed by Nikita Kucherov, Jake Guentzel, Braden Point, and Brandon Hagel, but the backbone is still Andrei Vasilevsky, quietly putting up an 18-7-2 line with a goals against hovering around 2.3. He is the kind of goalie who lets the skaters play with a bit of swagger, because they know if a mistake turns into a break, the guy behind them has seen that movie already. It is funny, Tampa were stumbling not that long ago, and now the same core looks like it has remembered exactly who it is. Across the ice, Philadelphia feels very different. Their record, 22-13-8, says we are for real, but the way they get there is far more blue-collar. They have built this thing around structure, keeping scores low, choking off shots, and leaning into a defense-first identity that proudly keeps opponents under 3 goals a night and among the lowest shot totals allowed in the league. And that kind of approach is great when you are reasonably healthy, and right now, they are not. Tyson Foerster, who had climbed to the top of their goal-scoring chart before everything went sideways, is out long-term after arm surgery, and that is not just a missing jersey, it is a missing safety valve. Jamie Drysdale, the sort of puck mover who helps a system breathe, is on injured reserve as well. On top of that, Travis Konechny and Bobby Brink are sitting in that uncomfortable day-to-day bucket with upper body issues after already being out on Saturday. So even if one or both returns, you are probably not getting them at full throttle. Carl Grundstrom has been battling an illness and is listed as questionable, which is not exactly the ideal energy boost for a lineup that already has to squeeze offense out of details. The Flyers still have a fun skill core in Trevor Zegras, Matvei Michkov, Owen Tippett, and Sean Couturier, and on their good nights it feels like a highlight package waiting to happen. The problem, and you felt it in that 7-2 loss 2 nights ago, is what happens when that creative talent tries to punch through a locked-in Tampa structure backed by a hot goalie. For stretches it looked like Philadelphia were pushing a heavy cart uphill, working for every clean zone entry while Tampa needed only a few cracks to blow the thing open. Normally, a quick turnaround against the same opponent in the same rink screams revenge spot for the home side, and that emotional bump matters, especially in a building that gets loud fast like Xfinity Mobile Arena. But here, you also have a road team on a roll, driving 5-on-5 play, finishing chances, and winning the special teams battle, all while the home team is patching its lineup together and trying to find secondary scoring in real time. Market-wise, that has already shown up with Tampa priced as a solid favorite on the money line and sitting as the puck line side, roughly in that -155 neighborhood, which is the betting world's way of saying, we see the same gap you see. So when you weigh current form, health, depth, and the way these two styles clash, the path you keep coming back to is the one where the road team's momentum and firepower are simply harder to ignore than the revenge angle from the Flyers crowd. As our first pick for this matchup, the Tampa Bay Lightning money line is our full game side pick. Now, if you slide your focus away from who might walk out happy and look at how the scoreboard might actually fill up, the picture shifts a bit. The number hanging out there is 6.5 goals, with bookmakers quietly shading things toward the under, which is interesting given we just watched these two combine for 9. It is a classic spot where the final score and the underlying profile are not telling quite the same story. On paper, the team's season numbers sit close to that posted total. Tampa scores around 3.5 a night and gives up about 2.6. Philadelphia scores right around 3 and allows just under 3. If you only average those out on a napkin, you would shrug and say, sure, 6 or 7 feels about right. But hockey totals care at least as much about how those goals appear as how many you see in a box score, and that is where things get more nuanced. Tampa's offense is loud, but the way they play is not reckless. They are not some run and gun, trade 5 chances for every 3 you give up kind of team. They sit around the middle of the pack in shots per game and quietly rank among the stingier clubs in shots allowed. They like quality over volume. They pick their spots, then they lean on a strong penalty kill and Vasilevsky's steady work to suffocate games once they grab a lead. That style tends to create long stretches of hockey where not much happens on the shot clock, which is not always fun for neutrals, but it is very friendly to an under once the initial burst passes. Philadelphia, for their part, almost seem allergic to chaos. Their identity this season has been all about keeping games in that 2-1 or 3-2 lane, protecting the middle of the ice, and relying on structure and back pressure instead of turning everything into a track meet. They give up very few shots, sit in the league's basement on the power play, and generally prefer tight, grindy hockey to wild swings. That was supposed to be Saturday's script too. For a while it was, and then things blew apart. The interesting question is whether that kind of game repeats, or whether the next 90 minutes of combined ice time between these teams has more in common with the tight-checking forecast everyone expected the first time. Layer the injuries back in. Forster, a major piece of their shooting punch, is gone for months. Drysdale is out, which hurts their ability to transition cleanly. Konechny and Brink are not fully secure for this one, and even if one of them jumps back in, you are not counting on peak rhythm. That all undercuts an offense that was already leaning on balance and grit more than stars and sizzle. On top of that, Tampa's missing puck moving on the back end tends to slow their counter game just a bit, even if the forwards are more than capable of punishing mistakes when they get them. Then you land on the goaltending picture. Vasilevsky brings that 18-7-2, 2.3 type stat line into a matchup where he just handled this same lineup and did not have to overextend. Across from him, Philadelphia are expected to turn to Dan Vladar after Samuel Ersson's rough night, and Vladar's own numbers this year live in that solid, around 2.5 goals against, just above .910 save percentage neighborhood. So you have one team that protects the house well and has an elite starter, and another that suppresses shots, drags you into a structured game, and now likely has its steadier goalie back in net. If this were a random meeting in November coming off normal scores, a lot of people would glance at that setup and immediately lean to a 5-goal kind of night, not 7. Blowouts like Saturday also tend to provoke adjustments. Philadelphia's staff has now seen what happens when they loosen the screws even a little. It would be very surprising if they did not double down on neutral zone discipline, lean even harder on that low event style, and treat every odd man rush against as a personal insult. Referees sometimes tighten things up as well in a quick rematch, which can shave away some of the free-flowing stuff that turns into goals. Put all of that into one pot, and the shapes you keep picturing are scores like 3-2, 4-1, maybe 4-2 if special teams really wake up, which sit under or only barely flirt with that 6.5 target most of the time. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Toronto Maple Leafs versus Colorado Avalanche. If you were building a video game boss level for Toronto, it would look an awful lot like this matchup in Denver. You walk straight into altitude, you get the team with the best record in the league staring you down, and you have to do it in a building where nobody has managed to knock them off in regulation yet. It is the sort of spot where the margin for error does not feel like a margin at all. It feels like a cliff edge. Colorado comes in at 33-4-7 overall, and that home line of 19-0-2 is the part that makes coaches reach for the antacids. Unbeaten in 21 home dates, piling up points in front of a fan base that now expects, almost as a default setting, that the night ends with 2 more in the bank. You can feel the pattern in their games at Ball Arena. The first period is fast. The second period is where the legs start to burn, and by the third period visiting teams often look like they are skating through wet cement. Toronto is not some soft touch. They are sitting at 22 to 15 to 7, but the split between home and road tells you a lot. 16 to 5 to 5 in their own barn feels steady and comfortable. 6 to 10 to 2 on the road feels much more like a reality check. Once you take away last change, your own glass and boards, and the comfort of familiar rinks, this version of the Leafs becomes a different animal and not always a friendly one. Stylistically, Colorado plays exactly like you would expect from a group that is dominating the standings. They score just over 4 goals per game, they allow just over 2, and they spend most nights living in the offensive zone. They send a steady stream of pucks toward the net, and league tracking has them sitting first in total shots on goal and first in total goals. That is the nerdy, spreadsheet way of saying that when they decide to push the pace, they usually drag the other team along whether that opponent likes it or not. Toronto's profile is a little stranger, which, honestly, is very on brand for the Leafs. They are not a volume shooting team at the same level. They sit closer to the middle of the pack for total shots, but when they do get looks, they make them count. With 148 goals on the year, roughly 3.4 per night, they sit around 8th in the league in raw scoring, and that is on relatively modest shot counts. In simple terms, they do not always shoot often, but when they do, the chances tend to be dangerous. Form-wise, there is no sneaky angle here that the market has somehow missed. Colorado had a brief wobble, dropped a couple, and then went right back to steamrolling people, including that 8th spot they dropped on Ottawa and the shutout of Columbus. Toronto, on their side, comes in on a heater that features that 5-0 dismantling of Vancouver, where they turned a supposed test into a target practice session. So we are not dealing with a sleepy favorite and a broken underdog. We are dealing with two teams feeling pretty good about themselves at the same time. The pricing on the boards matches that reality. Most markets have Colorado sitting around a minus 260 money line, with Toronto floating in the low plus 200 range. That is the odds maker's way of saying, yes, the road team is dangerous, but the home team is still a clear step ahead. And that is before you even sprinkle in the context that this is the first meeting of the season, with the Cup favorite and current points leader trying to protect a perfect regulation home record. Injury-wise, the picture looks messy on paper but very instructive once you think about how the teams are actually performing. Colorado is still thumping opponents despite missing real pieces, with Gabriel Landeskog, Devon Toews, Joel Kiviranta, and Mackenzie Blackwood all listed as out or on injured reserve. Toronto's absences sit more on the depth and defensive side, with Anthony Stolarz, Chris Tanev, Dakota Joshua, and Dakota Mermis on injured reserve rather than any of their headline scorers disappearing from the lineup. So the Avalanche are down more name talent and have not slowed down, while the Leafs are closer to full firepower up front and are still dealing with that split personality between home and road. Put all of that together, the altitude, the shot volume gap, the home invincibility vibe, the way Colorado's structure keeps humming even with key players in suits, and you get a side picture that keeps tilting to one bench the longer you stare at it. As our first pick for this matchup, the Colorado Avalanche money line is our full game side pick. The total is pegged at 6.5, with the under slightly juiced and plus money dangling on the over. That is basically the books giving you a little smirk and saying, we know these offenses are explosive, but we want to see if you actually trust them to go all out tonight. On paper, the ingredients for goals are almost comical. Colorado is averaging roughly 4.05 goals on about 34.4 shots per game while allowing a little over 2.16 against. That is a huge offensive engine bolted onto a pretty tight defensive shell, the kind of combo that turns small mistakes into instant scoreboard damage. Toronto brings its own chaos. They are scoring around 3.36 goals per game and giving up about 3.16, and they tend to get outshot on average, with something like 31.1 shots against versus 26.94. That is exactly the wrong kind of stat line to carry into a building where the home team already tilts the ice and loves to pile up attempts. If you picture this in simple terms, it is one team that constantly presses forward facing another team that sometimes spends long stretches leaning on its goalie and its finishing talent to bail it out. When you zoom in on recent games, the story for a higher scoring environment gets even louder. Over their last 10, Colorado has been playing in what feels like 4.2 to 1.9 type hockey, which is shorthand for we score a lot and do not give much back. Toronto's recent stretch looks more like 4.0 to 2.6. You do not need a spreadsheet to see that those two profiles stacked together point closer to something in the 8-goal neighborhood than a quiet 6.5, especially when both sides prefer to play on the front foot. There is also that quirky trend that keeps popping up in betting previews. Totals have gone over in 14 straight games when Toronto visits Colorado. It is not a law of nature, it is just a trend, but 14 in a row in one building does tell you that this matchup, in this rink, tends to turn into a bit of a circus rather than a chess match. Tonight's specific context leans that same way. The main offensive stars on both sides are available. Colorado is still pouring in goals even with some key pieces missing, which shows how deep that scoring tree really runs. Toronto's recent surge has been fueled by embracing their attacking identity, not by pretending they are suddenly a low event, 2-to-1 kind of team. And altitude has its own sneaky role. It shows up late, in the third, when tired legs, sloppy gaps, and late penalties can turn a normal total into something that blows past the number in a hurry. The one honest, plausible path to an under is if Toronto's coaching staff decides to slam the brakes, dump pucks deep all night, and play rope-a-dope hockey for 60 minutes, trying to turn this into a grind rather than a race. That sort of approach is always on the table strategically, but given how both teams have been winning lately, the more realistic script feels like we punch harder, instead of everyone sit back and clog the neutral zone. So when you string the team profiles, the recent scoring patterns, the historical trend in this building, and the game flow possibilities together, it looks much more like a matchup, where 7 or more goals is the normal kind of wild, not some bizarre outlier. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Carolina Hurricanes versus Detroit Red Wings. It's hard to ask for a better setup than this one, right? You have a top team from the Metropolitan stepping into a packed house against the top group in the Atlantic on a night when a legend's number is going to the rafters and every person in the building showed up early just to soak it in Sergei Fedorov style. Carolina does not exactly stroll in either. They come in on a 4-game heater, and it is not the cute kind where they survive wild shootouts. It is the suffocating version where Seattle and Anaheim together barely manage 25 shots on goal, and their season-long identity is still that low event, low mercy brand of hockey that allows roughly 24 to 25 shots a night, which is the best shot suppression in the league right now. Here is the thing though, Detroit is not playing the part of plucky underdog anymore. They have spent the last couple of months quietly behaving like a real contender at home. They are sitting on top of the Atlantic. They just rolled through Ottawa, Vancouver, and Montreal by a combined 14-4, and they have gone 7-2-1 in their last 10, which feels a lot less like a fluke and a lot more like a team figuring itself out at the perfect time. On top of that, Little Caesars Arena has basically turned into a problem for visitors, with a 15-8-1 home mark that says this is our place. You are just renting ice for the night. The market, as usual, shows a tiny bit of respect and a whole lot of brand bias. Most books are still treating Carolina as the shinier toy, hanging a road money line in the neighborhood of -150 with Detroit sitting roughly +125 as the home dog. When you stack that against how similar these two are in actual production, it gets interesting. Carolina is sitting around 3.36 goals for and 2.96 against per game. Detroit lives right next door at about 3.11 for and 3.04 against, and both are leading their divisions. So the numbers say coin flip between two first-place teams, but the price still tilts like Carolina is a clear tier above. Now add the human layer on top of that spreadsheet story. Detroit gets the big emotional swell of Fedorov night, with long pregame ceremonies, fans in vintage sweaters, a bit of nostalgia in the air, and that extra edge you only get when a franchise icon is watching from a fresh banner. Carolina, for their part, has to handle the classic schedule tax. They roll in for this one, then head out again to visit St. Louis the very next night, which usually nudges a team toward a more controlled, manage the energy kind of performance rather than an all-out tilt every shift. In contrast, Detroit knows this game has been circled on their calendar for weeks. They just ripped off 3 straight wins, 2 of them at home, and their starter has settled into exactly the role the front office hoped for when they traded for him. John Gibson already has 3 shutouts this year and is coming off a 27-save blanking of Montreal. And when a goalie is that dialed on a night where the crowd is already buzzing before puck drop, it tends to tilt the feel of close games toward the home bench. And one more small but very real edge, Detroit shows up with no injuries listed on the main league-wide reports, while Carolina has been navigating depth losses like Charles Alexis Legault and Noah Philp plus a season-ending blow to Pyotr Kochetkov, which chips away at their margin even if the headline names are still in the lineup. Put all of that together and you do not get a blowout prediction. You get a situation where the supposed underdog has home ice, the hotter goalie, the cleaner injury sheet, and the emotional tailwind on a special night, all while the numbers on the page say these teams are almost the same. So if you are looking at it not as who has the prettier logo on national TV, but as who might outperform the current price, this starts to feel less like a risky gamble and more like taking the side that is underpriced for the moment. As our first pick for this matchup, the Detroit Red Wings money line is our full game side pick. Books have posted a total of 6.5, with the under sitting around that familiar -130 range, and the first reaction when you see that number next to these two offenses is probably, come on, how does this not turn into a track meet? Carolina sits a bit north of 3.3 goals per night, Detroit a shade over 3.1, so if you just add those two together on a napkin you are already brushing up against that total before you factor in empty netters and special team swings. But scoring is not just about how many goals these teams can produce, it is about how they choose to play when the stakes feel bigger. Carolina's whole identity is built on limiting chaos, and that shows up in a brutal way for opponents on the shot clock. They give up only about 24.31 shots per game, lowest in the league, and they just held Anaheim and Seattle to a combined 25 shots in back-to-back nights. That is the kind of thing that looks almost boring on a highlight reel, but it is a nightmare if you are holding an over ticket. Detroit's profile is a bit different, but it still leans toward control, not chaos. They allow roughly 27.8 shots per game and take about 28.4 themselves, pairing that with a power play that is one of the league's better units and a penalty kill that lives in the low 80s. So their games tend to look like this. They do enough to score, but they also get through long stretches where not a lot happens except puck battles on the wall and smart line changes. It is less fireworks on every rush and more two teams slowly tightening a lid on the pot until the first mistake. Now drop that style into this context. You have Carolina starting a back-to-back, which historically nudges them toward an even more structured, first-line change, smart puck management approach because they know they have another 60 minutes waiting for them tomorrow night in St. Louis. You have Detroit coming off that 5-2 loss in Raleigh on December 27th, a reminder that if they try to trade rushes and stretch passes with this Carolina group, they are more likely to get burned than rewarded. You also have a long pregame ceremony, which sounds emotional and fun, and it is, but there is a practical side to it too. Warm-ups feel a bit different, legs cool off, sticks get a touch tighter, and early in the first period you often see both teams take a few shifts just to reset their rhythm rather than throwing haymakers right away. There is also the simple fact that both teams know how small the margins are. This is not a desperate game for playoff lives. It is a heavyweight measuring stick between two division leaders, and that sort of matchup tends to settle into a style where players think, if we get to 3, we probably give ourselves a great chance here. That is not a guaranteed final score, of course. It is just the natural mindset when you put two elite defensive structures, a locked-in John Gibson and Carolina's stingy shot suppression into the same building. Pace gets managed, line matching matters, and coaches are quicker to shorten benches or lock into 3-line rhythm rather than rolling 4 groups and inviting a wild, stretched-out game. So while the raw goal averages shout offense, the actual way these teams are playing right now quietly suggests something tighter. You have shot economy on both sides, a ceremony night that tends to shave a few early chances off the board, a road favorite that prefers structure, and a home team that just reminded itself what happens when it opens things up too much against this opponent. When you look at a 6.5 posted total through that lens, with the market charging a little extra tax to bet the under, the case for a lower scoring, more playoff-flavored script starts to feel a lot more comfortable than the scoreboard fireworks version. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.